Hi, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 16 of SteamLUG Cast. We're recording this on the 21st of August, 2015. My name is Cheese. With me I have Dorito.
Hello.
And Hero.
Hey.
How have you guys been?
Fantastic.
I'm doing quite well.
What about you, Cheese?
Actually, I've been really sick, but I'm getting better, and stronger and faster every day. And soon I'll be like 100% cyborg. Or Android, or whatever.
Or a Frenchman.
Yeah. Before we dive into the main show, I might have a bit of a recap of what we've been playing lately. Hero, what have you been up to?
Well, Nuclear Dawn has been on sale for 80% off, I believe. And the player count has been a lot higher. I've been able to convince some friends to play along with that, which has been okay. I enjoy it a lot, but some people are not quite used to how the game plays out, and sometimes we don't always win, but that's alright. Similarly, I've been playing a lot more Dota 2 and learning how to die less. That's basically it.
The thing about Nuclear Dawn, it's like you say, like some people aren't prepared for the way that the game ends and how it goes. And people who like play all the way to the end and they don't want to. You're like, man, there's a surrender button there. You can use that if you want. But then conversely, there are people who surrender and then they're like, well, you know, I want to play the whole game through.
I think a lot of people, they're like, hey, this is a tactical shooter, and so I'm going to run around shooting things. But it's important to capture the resources, and it's also important to destroy the enemy buildings. So there's a balance that's different from how most other shooters are, and it's a little more of a learning curve. But it's fun.
Yeah, I feel like the tipping point, you know, the point where one team becomes so powerful that it's not possible to beat them anymore. I feel like that is a little bit early in the game, and that it's not clear to a lot of players.
And a lot of people also get frustrated because they feel like they're going to lose, but you can tie the game if you're good enough at turtling.
Are you talking about natural selection too?
And similar, but no.
No, rhetorical question. No, you weren't, but that is much the same there.
Well, yeah.
People don't realize they have lost it and they turtle forever. You can't tie the game that way, but you will lose eventually, but you're just wasting everybody's time by not voting to concede.
Yeah. So, Dorito, what have you been playing?
Not a hell of a lot, really. I've been playing some more Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. I've been putting quite a lot of hours into that game because I'm pretty much trying to 100% it. And that stupid achievement for some of the thingies I've found isn't triggering. I found all of them, but they have a story attached to them, and if you don't listen to it completely, the achievement won't trigger. So I have to go through the list and listen to every single one of them completely again, because it doesn't show me which one I haven't listened to.
That's brilliant.
Yes. And on top of that, I have been tinkering a little bit with Godot, that open source game engine that is awesome and can be had at godotengine.org. It's quite nice, but it is poorly documented, so getting to learn it means learning by doing, looking at the demos, reading the code in there. That's quite well documented, at least quite well commented. So yeah, it's a bit of effort to learn it, but after my recent experience with a not mentioned proprietary engine, I've decided that open source or get the F out of here.
I was gonna ask how it compared to that. Are you finding any like key features missing aside from documentation?
I do not, besides the fact that this has pretty much no inbuilt geometry creation abilities. Like it's a classic engine where you just import everything, put it together.
Right, you have to import everything.
That sounds nicer.
And that other engine had some really nice and powerful terrain tools and CSG geometry to build with. So yeah, that's missing a bit. But since I suck at modeling and map making anyway, it's all about the code, the API for me so far. And getting stuff done with these and with Godot is easier because it has a really fleshed out 2D engine, and it's just easier to experiment with just a bitmap you throw in there instead of a model.
I'm no expert with Godot, but if you ever need help with anything, you're free to ask me.
I think there's also the IRC channel is fairly active and developers hang out in there, is that right?
Yeah, the official IRC channel has the main contributor there all the time.
Is that Poot?
That's Redoes.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty much an RTFM guy, and that means I try to waste
Yeah.
people's time, to not waste people's time, and I just Google it up or read some demos or whatever, or just try it out. And that has the biggest learning experience for me instead of just asking a random person.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough.
So, Cheese, what have you been playing?
Well, been playing a little bit of Ark here and there with Namoda and Mim, when we find time. Since I was being sick, I kind of, just kind of fuzzy-headed, can't get a lot of work done, so I just sort of sat down and tried to work through a couple of games. I managed to finish off Apotheon, Parallax, Shovel Knight, and the Magic Circle within the past month or so, I guess. And yeah, they're all really cool games. I'm really happy to have invested the time in them and sort of finished out their stories and gameplay. Also played a bit of Satellite Rain, which we're probably going to mention a bit later on, which I'm really enjoying as well. It's not quite Syndicate, but certainly got a lot that makes it interesting. And also been testing and playing The Swindle and Airscape, which we're probably also going to mention later. Fun.
Hooray. It's quite the list.
P6, stay home, play video games. You're doing it right.
Yep, rug up in a blanket, sit there and zone out playing video games. It's good. Wow, did I say video games? I say computer games.
Electronic entertainment software.
That's the one. Alright, so...
Moving on to community things.
That thing.
For our past events, we had Codename Cure after the last cast, followed by Planetary Annihilation, Half-Life Deathmatch, and Mercenary Kings. Have any of you attended any of those?
I was hoping to make the Planetary Annihilation one, but I ended up resting and sleeping in.
No, this is one where I don't own any of these games except for, well, Half-Life Deathmatch and that free-to-play one, which both aren't to my fancy. Not really.
I made all of them.
Fair enough.
So, Codename Cure...
Anything exciting?
At first, Codename Cure was really brutal. All of us would join the game, we would die, the game would be over, and we'd try again.
Nice.
But then we started to realize you basically need to speedrun it. You just sprint past as many zombies as you can, shoot the ones that are in the way, get to the objective, press the button, plant the bomb, then run back. And then...
It actually sounds kind of cool.
At that point, once we figured out that's what we needed to do, then it became a lot more interesting, and we actually finished some maps. So that was cool. But you just always have to be moving, or else you get trapped behind a wall of zombies that you just can't get through.
Yeah, it seems like user reviews highlight that, but the game description doesn't on the Steam store.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect when I first played it, but it was interesting. Planetary Annihilation, we discovered that the bots are still way better than us. We were mostly playing cooperatively, and died a lot, but explosions are pretty, so... Half-Life Deathmatch I wasn't there for very long because it was a little bit latency sensitive, but Mercenary Kings is quite interesting. I never played it before the event, so it's a cut-like, but with a lot more content, which is odd. So playing that cooperatively was pretty fun.
And on the horizon, we've got TF2 coming up after the show, So You Are Being Hunted, Coffin Dodgers, and Terraria.
So, one thing to note for the Sir You're Being Hunted event, you will need to opt into the multiplayer beta in order to join in on that. Unless if something changes before tomorrow, but I doubt that.
Yeah, I was thinking to say maybe it's worth adding that to the event description.
That is in the description, I believe.
Oh, sorry, the title.
Well, I can do that, if it's not been done already.
Yeah, So You're Being Hunted multiplayer is quite an interesting beast. I have only played it with one person from the community, whose name I've shamefully forgotten. But it is quite a mind game, more than any of its gameplay mechanics. It's really a mind game.
It's on my wish list. Somehow I've never picked it up and never had a chance to play it, but it seems really cool.
It's a fairly small scope game, but it is cool nevertheless. And there's Terraria, which is mother-frickin' Terraria, so yes. That's good. If you thought...
People seem to have been waiting for that for a long time.
Yeah, if you thought Starbound had not enough content, wasn't a complete game for you, this is the one to get if you like the overall gameplay style. They're similar enough, although they are quite different. in other respects. If you want your 2D Metroidvania game, I guess that's how the cool kids call them these days, Terraria is the single one to get if you only ever get one.
I thought it was more about like crafting and building and Starbound-ish type stuff.
And apparently that's still called Metroidvania for God knows what reason.
Oh, like just for the controls? Huh.
No idea.
The way I see it is it's a two-dimensional Minecraft, but that might be a limited view.
Yes. It's Minecraft in 2D and with actual fun and challenging and engaging gameplay.
Last time we played Starbound, it wasn't so bad. I haven't come back to it for a while though. Moving on to other community stuff, we had a little bit of lag in the show edits, and Hero, Telly, Corbin, and John put in a bunch of effort to catch up. So episodes 12 through 15 are online and available to listen to. So thanks to those guys for doing the work there.
No problem.
I spotted that Norbert has released a new version of his Prince of Persia 1 and 2 level editor called Apoplexy. If anybody is excited by that, they can hop over to the prince.org forums and check out some more details. Prince of Persia is a fairly old game, but it had a source release a little while back, and people have been working on like SDL ports of the game. I think there's also like a before that there was like an open source implementation of the engine, but I never really had a chance to check that out. But the SDL version's pretty sweet.
Is it SDL2?
I think so. Yeah.
Nice.
It's pretty recent. I haven't looked at it in a couple of months, but definitely gonna come back to it and stream a playthrough at some point.
So apparently you have done something. Something.
Yeah, apparently.
That's called Winter's Wake, and there's a demo out of it.
Yeah. I managed to, in addition to being sick as a dog, I managed to get a demo of my game out earlier this month. I've mentioned it a couple of times previously, maybe, I can't remember. But the short and long of it is that it's a game that's very difficult to describe, and it's sort of a hybrid of a first-person game and a text adventure. And you kind of use mouse look style controls like you'd have in a first-person game, but you don't see any visuals. You just have text descriptions of whatever it is you're facing. So you kind of like use a compass to remember where you are and what you're looking at. And if you want to look north, you just move the mouse and look north, and go down the path and stand on the hill and do all that sort of stuff. Get the key from the wizard or whatever it is. And it's got a fantasy story, but there are no wizards or keys at the moment. The demo's quite short, but I hope it gives an idea of the sort of thing that it is. Yeah. Have you had a chance to check out that?
Yeah, I only played it briefly because of you see how little I actually played of just about anything. But yeah, I would describe it as being visually blind while still having all the sensory input just in a different format.
Right, because it's got positional audio as well. So when you look around, you hear stuff in the scene moving around you. And the background's kind of tinted depending upon the things that you would be looking at. So if you look at the sun, it might be slightly yellow, or if you look at the ground, it's gonna be a lot darker and that sort of stuff.
And if you look in the sun, it's all bright yellow.
And I really like the background coloring and the positional audio. It helps you feel like you're there without having any traditional visuals.
It's been interesting. Like I got a bunch of feedback from it so far. It's been interesting to people struggle with the word immersion, because to a lot of people, immersion means hyper-realistic graphics and everything's got to be realistic. But I don't think immersion really is about realism specifically. It's about the ability to lose yourself in something. And so to see people kind of who aren't used to thinking of more abstract stuff as being immersive, it's kind of interesting. Only a few people have been brave enough to use the word, but a lot of people are describing, immersion, which is cool.
Right.
And so if anybody is interested, I have a dev stream happening tomorrow morning at 2200 UTC, I think it is. We're going to be talking about the engine a little bit and some of the effort that I've been putting into making that behave how I want. Yeah, that's cool. Anyone who wants to check it out, feel free. If anybody does, I would love to get my hands on some of the analytics logs that tell me what order you've been looking at stuff in and how long you've been looking at stuff for.
You're snooping on them players.
It doesn't automatically send it back. People go email it to me. And you know what it is, how hard it is to convince people to do that sort of thing.
I did it.
But yeah, anything that that lets me understand how players are approaching things, that like helps me tune things up and make things more discoverable. I found that a lot of people are struggling to find the bed, which is sad, but you know, fair enough. Something they got to do something about.
Yeah, that's one of my issues, if you don't mind me telling you.
Yeah.
That's transition between objects is too abrupt. That's what I told you early on in the dev cycle. I believe that it would be nice if you were figuring out when you were getting closer to other objects, like text fading in from that area or something.
Yeah. I mean, there's stuff like that I want to experiment with, but right now, as I sort of mentioned in the first dev stream, it's like some of my approaches towards development are to like get everything up as bare bones as possible, so that I can get some insights from that, and then refine and polish bits and pieces. So at the moment, it's not really possible for me to do that kind of thing. But that's stuff that I definitely want to play with as we move forward.
That is perfectly reasonable, and you should stick to it totally.
Yeah, it's like you can invest a lot of effort early on, but if you do kind of polish stuff up early on and then later on you have the design insight to be able to see that it's not the direction you want to go, you've potentially wasted a lot of time and effort there. But it's tricky. It's all a balancing act. But probably enough of waffling about my thing. Onto some Steam and Valve news. Valve have removed support for suspend in SteamOS.
Which surprises no one, because power management on Linux is still a mess because of that AHCBI standard, or however it's called. And yeah, it's not working properly. If you resume from it, your graphics driver might be fuzzed and all other fun stuff, so they are not supporting it anymore officially, which is reasonable. I don't know how important suspend actually is for a console-like experience. You have it on to play games, or you turn it off. That's what I do.
Yeah. I never really use suspend, but it's always, I don't know, anything that moves SteamOS away from being another Linux distro. I mean, this isn't a big difference, like it's nothing compared to some of the other changes that might occur, or could occur in the time that it takes for stuff to reach upstream. For things like, say, the XPad drivers, I think there are still bits and pieces that aren't available to users on some distros. Anything that separates them makes things awkward in terms of developers who are targeting SteamOS versus developers who are targeting Linux. It's always kind of worrying that things might get a bit out of sync there, and people who aren't using SteamOS will get left behind a little. But I don't think that's an issue for suspend support, of course. Yeah, like I've kind of been out of the loop a bit this year. Old Yellow reference, but yeah. So I haven't been able to pay a lot of attention. I've been focusing on trying to get game development done and all that sort of stuff. But it's felt like, just watching the SteamLUG bot list out new titles and stuff, it's felt like there's been an increase in the frequency of releases of Linux games. Have you seen that, Dorita, or am I imagining it?
I don't know. This number is just something that is floating out there in space. At some point last year, even, I realized it's pointless to keep track of everything. I'm now I've started to cherry pick back then, and I'm continuing to do so. It's as intransparent to me as regular releases for Windows were back in the day. It's just stuff coming out. It might be interesting, it might not be. We are at the point where it's a constant stream. It's not every game we want, but it's continuous to me.
I think it's awesome. It's always great to see more stuff, but it's also I don't know, it passing of an era, I guess. Like it's a little bit sad to not be able to keep on top of everything, to know everything about every game that there is.
Some of them are quite poopy, so be happy that you don't.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff that's not for me.
I think the important thing is that Valve continues to make their storefront have ways to filter through the stuff that you might want to see and you might not. So with tags and curators, recommended games, things like that, they try to make it so there's not as much of a flood for individuals. Not that that's perfect, but
floods are fine. I mean, I don't feel like Steam needs to be a primary discoverability platform. Like, or at least the Steam storefront. I feel like it's better to hear about things from developers or your friends or people that you know who you know about their tastes and stuff, so you can compare that to your own rather than just fixating on what has only just been released by people, games that you've never heard of and stuff. But that's my approach. But yeah, 1400 is more than 1400 is a nice number to have. And there's stuff on this first page here that I've never heard of. Oh, thanks, Corbin. Alright, sorry, I'm getting totally distracted. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Tech news. Lots of stuff going on.
So there has been lots of Vulkan stuff going on at SIGGRAPH this year. Just last week, or even, well, it was well into this week it was going on. And there have been demos like Vulkan running on Android, on Power VR graphics by Imagination Tech. And yes, they have this big scene full of gnomes. At first they are rendering it in OpenGLES and then in Vulkan. And the difference is really day and night. For when you really have to push all those draw codes, none of these gnomes were instanced. It's just every gnome is its own gnome, like a true proper individual gnome. And when they zoom out and speed up the scene, and it's just draw calls upon draw calls upon draw calls, Vulkan is really winning out massively.
It's quite impressive. Especially considering the hardware that it's running on. It's just so much better performance.
Yes, much less CPU overhead. They are GPU bound the entire time, and it's using more threads, more cores on the CPU. I'm looking forward to this.
And you can see the graphs. It's not only the frame rate that they show, they also have the CPU and GPU graphs. So you can tell it's threaded a lot better, and it's just able to push the limits the entire time.
It was interesting to see that in some cases CPU usage was way up versus OpenGL, and then in other cases OpenGL CPU usage was way up, and it's just kind of interesting to see that it's fundamentally there are some different approaches there.
Well, at some point they were able to get past a bottleneck that pushed up the CPU a lot more when using Vulkan. That's when they were spinning the camera around wildly, and so it actually was a good frame rate, unlike in OpenGL, but it also used the CPU in order to do that.
Yeah.
So, NVIDIA was also having a talk about Vulkan and showing some less spectacular demos, just some CAD applications basically on Vulkan, just to see that they have it working, that it's working much better than OpenGL or any other standard API. And yeah, it was a fairly high-level talk they had about some of the issues they were facing, and probably everybody else will face when porting over to Vulkan, what developers should do, that they should use OpenGL 4.5 2015, which now is a spec, but we won't talk about this, and pretty much try to go ASTO first, approaching zero driver overhead before Vulkan comes out, so they are ready for that and other good stuff. But yeah, you didn't see any kind of code that would tell you what to do with the actual Vulkan API, which is a bit sad, but it's still all under NDA, and well, it's not here yet.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's still a little way off before developers and then after that gamers can take advantage of it. But nice to see things moving along. The in previous shows we've mentioned the a sort of Steam machine type device. I don't know if it's going with that branding. I don't think it is. That used to be called the Steam Boy, which is now called the Smark Zero, I think.
Yes.
Looks like it's got final prices and specs and stuff set now at Gamescom.
Yeah.
For anybody who's excited.
I'm not excited anymore. If they said for this, even for this price tag, they would release by the end of this year, I would have taken the bait. But they are releasing late next year, and they are talking about these specs, which is a current generation AMD system on chip, and no, just no way. This hardware is barely cutting it now. It's not going to cut it at all in 2016, in late 2016.
And the price tag was approximately $300 US.
I don't know anything about handhelds. Is that ballpark price range for handheld gaming devices, like the whatever it is that Nintendo makes?
I believe it's around there, yes.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, when it launches for Nintendo devices, pretty sure it's around the same price. But of course, they're able to make it a lot cheaper over time.
If DS was here, I'd ask him what they were called.
Get it? Huh?
See what I did there? Yeah, yeah. All right, sorry. NVIDIA have released a Linux graphics debugger and profiler, which is neat. Available for Linux.
Yeah, so this is version 1.0, and we've talked about this before, I believe, but it's just really nice to have
I think so, yeah.
the graphical debugger that so many developers were complaining Linux lacked.
You gotta remember that this is only a graphics debugger, isn't it? Or is it capable of? Because I got the impression that it was just about debugging and profiling GL calls rather than debugging your actual application.
Yes. I don't remember exactly how in-depth it goes, but it is focused on GL.
Yeah, so for the developers who are complaining about not having a graphical debugger, they're generally talking about like debugging the C++ apps or whatever. But all tools are good tools.
Yeah, the profiling in that I've heard is really fancy, but I've not used it, so.
That's so people make good use of it, and we see less very much CPU-bound games on Linux, because that, in my opinion, has been a problem recently with bigger games releasing which are not very well optimized and could probably use some good old-fashioned graphics debugging. Or at least profiling and analyzing and optimizing and all that good stuff. So, here is good news for every VR enthusiast on the planet that also happens to run Linux. Apparently, HTC Vive is coming to Linux. It seems like it's aimed to be releasing same time at launch. But compared to just a couple of months ago, when the info was that basically they weren't planning on releasing it for Linux because I vaguely quote, these machines aren't powerful enough for that anyway. Well, now it's back on the table. There was a recent interview with a bigwig from HTC. That's what I'm calling it, fully professional. And yes, it's a really interesting interview in general, talking about the whole plans they have for the system and their take on VR. But yeah, the big news here is for us, it's coming to Linux, which I'm very happy about. My bet is set on this particular horse. Oculus can go eat a bag of, you know what.
Chips.
Yeah. Flowers. Did we say it was going to be flowers way back?
If flowers have phalluses, yes.
Yeah, they do. Stamens. Eat a bag of stamens. And we just found the episode title. You know what? I'm skeptical. Maybe HTC will be able to stick to this better, but it still feels like Linux comes last for Valve. For many things. I wouldn't be surprised if it was delayed a week or a few days or something.
Neither would I. But you have to remember, Linux coming last is still better than the norm, which is Linux not coming at all.
Yeah, and
Sort of. I mean, since they're trying to push SteamOS as a platform, I don't think it makes sense for them to have Linux coming last.
well, the way I see it
I think
is they're not going to abandon it with all the effort they've already put into SteamOS. So we will have it, in my opinion.
I think Sony's VR headset called Morpheus has something to do with them figuring out that it would be a competitive advantage, or at least a break-even, to also have their console platform with a compatible VR headset.
Yeah, I definitely hope it does, and it would definitely be in Valve's best interest to make sure it does.
And in my personal interest, because that would be fun.
People have been publishing videos of some of Virtual Programming's Eon ports compared against Windows, and they're kind of close. It's been really cool to see I mean, from what I hear, it's not perfect for everyone, but it's still nice to know that that people are plugging away in the back end, making things better for people over time.
Yeah, the big important one here is The Witcher 2, which, if your CPU can manage it, if you get past that flat CPU overhead tax, you basically achieve like almost to the frame performance parity between Windows and Linux, which is quite nice.
Yeah, it looked like there was about a 10 frame per second difference across the most of that video.
Yeah, and sometimes the Linux version was even ahead for
A little bit above, yeah.
Yeah. So this is really interesting, but you have to remember that you have to pay a price. That is a flat CPU overhead tax. It's nothing you do if you can't pay that tax will improve your FPS one bit. If you're CPU bound, you are CPU bound for good. You can, I've tried it back in the day, you can change every little last detail in the game to lowest, even so much as low the resolution, which is the only thing that affects it even slightly. If you can't pay that, you're not getting any performance. But if you can pay that, from then on out, you're very close to being GPU bound. That means you get all the performance you could get, which is very nice.
Yeah, it's especially nice because when The Witcher 2 first released for Linux, the performance was not quite so...
it was shit.
Yeah.
Real shit.
It wasn't very good. But now, having parity in some cases, that's really nice. So another game would be Dirt Showdown, which just came out for Linux. And in this case, it seems to have better performance across the board, except for when anti-aliasing is enabled, which would be due to the NVIDIA-specific anti-aliasing method that's available on Windows and not on Linux.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation with these ports, when compared to what we talked about last cast, Shadow of Mordor, which is like incredibly poorly performant on Linux, if you get right down to it. You get like half the FPS you get on Windows. If this whole fact-based situation does not evolve your maybe negative opinion on wrapper ports, you should check your bias. You should check your zealotry, let facts drive your opinions and not what you want to be true. Because if this gives near perfect performance for most people, now that it has been fixed, and some native ports don't, well, then it's not the technology per se is not bad.
And
you can't say that.
Yeah, I think anybody who wants to stick with native ports, then more power to them, I suppose. But yeah, the idea of just telling other people that they shouldn't be enjoying these kinds of things, it just seems silly to me.
Another thing to remember is Eon is native and is also a wrapper because it's compile time. It's kind of like how the graphics are in Source 1 games.
It would be like if you linked against WineLib, right?
Where is that information from? I would contest that information. That seems like a random Reddit post without any sources I've heard. As far as I know from VP's own marketing towards their potential customers, they do not touch source code. This is wrapped around the Windows binary.
From what I've heard, they have compile time wrappers and runtime wrappers.
But from where?
So, well, they say on all their stuff that it's native compile time stuff. That doesn't mean that they have to change the source code, but it means that when they're compiling it, they're translating things, as opposed to, like, the Wine style translating calls.
Fair enough.
So
DebConf is happening today? Tomorrow? Happened? I don't know.
Yeah, it happened. It started on the 15th, and it's still happening, and it will
it's still
happen
happening. All right,
tomorrow on the 22nd.
I know what I'm talking about. I'm on the ball.
So yeah, if you can blitz over to Heidelberg, you might still be able to attend a talk or two. I don't know. But yes, it's in Heidelberg, Germany, and there is stuff happening like on every DebConf, but, well, I didn't check out any of it. I always pick out the cherries after it's done.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at the schedule, but there's a bunch of videos up already, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, just a couple gigabytes. If you want to get this link, yeah, go ahead, but it'll take a while.
And previously, they had SteamOS related talks, and this year there have not been and will not be any.
I mean, it's DebConf, not Linux Gaming Conf.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Qt Quick for Beginners. I should totally download that. Anyone fancy some wine? I heard wine goes very well with cheese.
Isn't it funny? I don't drink.
Well, it goes well with you. It doesn't mean you should drink it yourself. So yeah, there has been a new Wine development release, and the big one here is that direct write is now good enough for actually rendering text in Steam.
So no longer do you need the no dwrite parameter in order to actually see any text in the Steam client.
Which is kind of important, because what are you running in Wine if not games? And games on PC are on Steam.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. From what I was gathering, it was a small change, but a small change with a big impact for that particular use case.
Well, a long-standing issue has been resolved with this development release.
Polynight Games. People making Inner Space, which I think we mentioned way back as a crowdfunding campaign. Put up a couple of blog posts about their experiences of switching from Maya to Blender. You had a read of that, Hero. What do you think?
Yeah, I found it really interesting that the particular artist who had written the post had said that previously they had tried Blender and immediately wrote it off as terrible, not useful, whatever, too complex. But having revisited it out of necessity because they didn't have the money for the licensing cost of Maya, decided that it was actually far superior for them. So they highlight some of the pros and cons of each application, and then go on to talk about what to expect if you're moving from one to the other, from Maya to Blender, and some tips to help people who are transitioning. There's a part 2 that's comprised of that. So I think that's cool.
These guys aren't using Linux to develop games, but it's always cool to see people talking about tools that are on Linux being viable and usable.
And open source
Or
software.
free software in general. Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I think this is important in many respects, not just free software, but this attitude with design people and even developers that say, oh, you need this expensive tool like this one, it's the industry standard. If you don't have that, you can't compete, you can't be productive in this workspace. It's with digital audio workstations where you have to have this one specific one. If you're doing dance music, it has to be Ableton Live. If you're doing digital photography, Photoshop, of course, or you can't be productive. And for 3D people, it's Maya, or oh, what are you even doing?
It's funny though, like part of that is true from a perspective of like if you've got experience in using something, then the only way that you can be efficient is to use the thing you know. And absorbing the learning overhead of switching to something new is often prohibitive. Like where do you how do you charge for that if you're freelance, what absorbs that time and what absorbs that cost? But generally because of that, usually artists or developers or whoever else, they'll just go, well, these are the tools I know that they work well, therefore they must be the best, and I don't have to think about it anymore,
Yeah, the problem is learning the tool instead of the trade.
Yeah, definitely. But even the guy that wrote this post said that he never really gave Blender a chance. He looked at it once and then just went back to Max. He says that that he wrote the post because he'd given it a chance and he found out that it was actually pretty cool. So it's always cool to have that kind of narrative out there, so that people who are on the same boat and aren't willing to invest the time to find out have some reason to believe that it might be better or it might be a worthwhile experience.
Yeah. I thought one of the most interesting parts was the author noted that Blender is often said to be more complex and harder to use, but they actually found that the interface was a lot nicer to use after trying it. So, little things like that.
Yeah,
It's cool.
it's interesting. Like I see a lot of people moving across struggle because just Blender's so shortcut driven. If you're using it efficiently, that like you watch somebody who knows what they're doing, and you're like, well, I could never do that because I don't know how to find out those shortcuts, and I don't know what I'm doing. It's like it makes it feel a lot more impenetrable than it is.
It's like the VI of 3D suits.
It kind of is.
Maybe.
Modal 3D editing.
But yeah, so that's cool. And their game looks cool too. I backed it on Kickstarter ages ago. And I'm looking forward to checking it out when playable builds become available. I think they're using Unity, if I remember right, as their engine. So you know, they're integrating Blender into their Unity workflows. Oh, you know, while we're still lingering just on the edge of tech news, did we previously touch on Unity having a Linux beta for the editor?
I think we did. I hope. I can't remember. But now we did, so this is out of the way.
Just in case we didn't, I'm in the beta test group, and my experiences so far have been positive.
Cool.
That is nice, because I'm currently more or less forced to deal with C#, and I might as well have some fun when tinkering with it. So,
Yeah,
though even my opinion on C# is actually quite nice. It's not a bad language, not at all.
there have been a few bugs here and there. That I mean, the majority of them have been fairly minor. And that just kind of goes to show that they put in the effort to make something fairly solid before they pushed it out for testing. But yeah, it's been fixes. I think they're onto the 4th build now of the engine for Linux, so or of the editor for Linux, sorry. So yeah, it's cool. I managed to go through the process of converting a Unity 4 project to Unity 5 with it, and that was pretty smooth and seamless, and was able to run the game fine, more or less.
So, speaking about C#, if I may, I find it really interesting that both Unity and Unreal Engine 4, which are basically the biggest engines at the moment, use C# quite heavily. What makes C# so fitting?
It's Java without being made by Oracle, and actually less verbose.
I think I'd rather Java.
And on top of that, I don't know. It seems like Mono is attractive to people because reasons. I mean, Unreal uses Mono as well, don't they?
Well, I mean, I guess maybe it comes down to runtimes. I mean, the Java runtime is certainly more problematic than the Java language, I think. And so Mono itself, I mean, you know, I don't know. It feels awkward to me for things to be chasing Mono, since Mono is, or was, no, is chasing a proprietary upstream thing. Like, it just seems so weird to me to be dependent on that sort of stuff.
On an open source reimplementation.
Well, pretty much all the important bits have been open sourced by now, so it's getting less and less challenging and more valid, but I agree with your general sentiment. But yeah, about that.
But I guess the reason that people favor Mono is because it's there, it's solid, it's cross-platform, and it seems to work, you know, like, it hits most of the nails on the head.
Yeah, and with Oracle and their we have copywritten our API bullshit against Google, it's safe to say that people that want this kind of language that has this feature set and are concerned about Oracle being mental like Oracle always was and is.
Well, there are still Java features that aren't in the OpenJDK, like, I think Flex still isn't in there, like the new widget library thing that they've got going. I don't think that's available yet, and it's just like, yeah, anything that's when it's behind on some platforms, then it's kind of useless, you know.
And Oracle is mental, so yeah, metal.
That too.
Well, whatever, blah blah blah. But no, drifting away from Java is good for the world. Everything that gives Larry Ellison less money is a benefit to humanity. Moving on to actual game topics.
Wow, 50 minutes. Yeah, let's do it.
So, Ollie Ollie 2.
Ollie Ollie 2.
Welcome to Ollywood was released for all platforms that are important, Linux, Mac, and Windows.
Or one important platform plus 2 Klingons.
On Steam and on GOG.
I thought the first game was new. I never really followed it. Do you know much about it?
I have not picked this one up. I enjoyed the little bit that I played the first one. It's brutally hard and rewarding to actually pull things off. The second one, reviews are really nice. Everybody is saying that it improves in substantial ways over the first one, so it's not just a money grab style release, and that's cool. So, and it has a simultaneous release on all the PC platforms as well as on Steam and GOG. So these are nice things.
Yeah. Humble Store has added a wishlist feature. for anybody who hasn't spotted it.
Which I'm enjoying that a lot, because when I see there's a DRM-free version of a game on Humble, I'd prefer to buy it on there than on Steam. So I'll remove it from my Steam wishlist and then forget about it forever. But now I have a place to store it.
For me, the wishlist on Steam has been the place where I put the games that I don't actually totally want, but just want a bit, but not enough to buy them at the price they're currently at.
I think my Steam wishlist is mostly full of titles that I am not necessarily interested in playing, but want to keep an eye on, which is awkward when somebody goes, "Hey, I saw this game on your wishlist. Do you want it?" I'm like, "Well, no, but thanks." But yeah, it feels like this is a feature that was missing from the Humble Store. Like it was sort of a key thing that it didn't have.
XCOM 2 has its Steam page up, and there's no pre-order button yet that would tempt you to be unreasonable. But yeah, it's up there. You can look at it, gasp at it, go to the forums.
You can put it on your wish list.
Indeed you can.
It's looking cool. It's looking cool. I was watching a video, and it looks like the stuff that you throw at the lab and the engineering bay, if you're familiar with the first game in the revamped franchise, it feels like the role of those extra stuff that you bring on board, like that comes out of your pool of soldiers, which I think is a neat idea. Like it adds a different kind of resource management.
They were saying how they wanted to add a little more strategy overall, so that's probably part of it.
Yeah, but it looks neat. Looks neat so far. Have you guys been following development? Are you excited about it?
I am fairly excited. The first one was good, but not a game that I would pick up at release at full price. If this one delivers on all the promised improvements, this would be the one I pick up at full price.
I think I paid full price for Enemy Unknown and was comfortable doing that. Like I got that level of enjoyment out of the game. But yeah, there were a couple of sort of flagging loose ends that felt like they could be improved upon. So I'm really hopeful that
And all the freaking bugs.
I don't care about bugs. I played Morrowind, man. That's my benchmark. Anything that crashes more than Morrowind, that's where I draw the line. That game was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Brigador. Tell us about Brigador.
Yeah, so I found this game. It's most importantly, it's coming to Linux. But it'll be available for pre-order on October 20th, and it is available for early access release on October 20th. It's a vehicular combat game, and isometric, and at first...
Looks like really angry Factorio.
It's odd. So, one thing that's really interesting about it is everything in the environments are destructible. So it's sort of this futuristic, like, corporate-run world. There's these industrial buildings everywhere, and as you're going to destroy your objectives, you can also destroy everything else.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. But it also seems to have a lot of complexity in the choice of your loadout, so the types of vehicles that you take and the types of weapons can greatly impact your playstyle, it seems like. Kind of hard to tell, since there's limited information about it right now.
It looks like it could be kind of funny. You know, I think I saw a trailer for this a couple weeks back, a month back. I don't know.
Well, that's how I discovered it through a trailer they just released recently.
11th of August. Yeah, okay, a couple weeks back ish. But yeah, looks like it could be interesting. Roller Coaster Tycoon World. Looks like it might have Linux support. If you it's not available yet, so there's like no information on the Steam store. But if you hop over to SteamDB, it looks like it's got most of the platform configuration in place for a Linux launch.
On the Steam store, it has system requirements, which is pretty much a very deliberate giveaway that they are planning it, though normally just don't appear. And it says in the OS explicitly SteamOS 64-bit. No other distribution, and other than that, the system requirements are pretty much saying nothing. They don't even list any kind of tier for graphics card. They are just saying dedicated video card with 1 GB of RAM or above. No OpenGL feature set they want you to have. So yeah, but I guess they are releasing it
towards the end of the year,
which is nice. More tycoon games for Linux.
Well, it looks like it's gonna be released towards the end of the year, so I guess the SteamOS launch is what they're aiming to coincide with.
If this doesn't just swarm with games, I will be thoroughly disappointed.
It could also be that they haven't finalized exactly what the requirements are, so that's why it's so vague at the moment.
Yeah. There's a game called Centris, which I have sitting on my wish list. It's one that I'm actually interested in playing. It's been recently released. Have you guys heard of that before?
I have heard of it. So, I'm not really sure how the gameplay is supposed to be, though. I know...
I don't know a huge amount about it, but you kind of control, where the different blocks that represent notes fall, I think.
Okay, so...
And in that way, you kind of, they spin around at different speeds and stuff, so that's where the challenge comes in.
What seemed interesting to me about this is you don't have to play it as like a rhythm game, you can also use it just to make music, like just do performances.
As a sequencer. But it looks neat.
And that includes exporting to a WAV file.
Alright, I didn't know that.
So...
kind of wish that it exported to some kind of, even MIDI would be fine. Something that you can open up in a sequencer and then mess with and change the arrangement of, or change the instrumentation of, or whatever.
Yeah, MIDI export would be interesting.
We mentioned Terraria earlier. It's out of beta and available on Steam and GOG for anybody who's keen to pick that up.
It's a modern classic. If you like good games, you should like this game.
So, not the current Humble Weekly bundle, but the previous one, the Return of Spaceboy, had 6 out of 7 games with native Linux support. That includes Steam Marines, Rockets, Starmaid, which is in early access, Interplanetary, Starwall, and Reassembly.
Which is totally obsolete information because there's no way to get this bundle anymore.
Yeah, but it was nice to see something that had almost entire Linux stuff.
Compared to the current one, which doesn't have a single one.
Yeah.
But there is a bundle that has Linux game. It's the Humble PC and Android Bundle 13.
Right. All Linux games, as is the usual trend for the PC and Android series.
So anything that takes either of your fancy that's in the current lineup there?
Well, there's a few of them that I was thinking about picking up previously. Maybe we should list them.
Yeah.
There's Crimson Land, Neverending Nightmares, Beat Buddy, Photonica, and then for the Beat the Average is Tiny Keep, Crown Takers, and Monster Loves You.
And then there will be more Beat the Average games coming soon.
Yeah.
Tiny Keep looks interesting.
Yeah, is this like a Dungeon Keeper-y type thing? Is it?
It seems so. Might pick this one up.
I know that probably most of us already have Beat Buddy because it's been in previous bundles.
Looking very briefly at the Tiny Keep video, it looks more like it's a hack and slashy type thing.
Oh.
But, yeah, it's all good.
Crimson Land is a sort of twin-stick shooter style. A lot of people have made comparisons to Robotron.
Oh, yeah.
Neverending Nightmares seems to be a very suspenseful 2D horror game, kind of. That's interesting, but I don't think I'd be able to actually complete it because I'm a scaredy cat.
Yeah, I guess I am. I'm kind of the same. Don't really go in for the games that aim to be horror games. I think Photonica was one that I'd looked at previously.
Which is an infinite runner sort of game.
Another Feral port, Company of Heroes 2, is set to arrive on Linux on August the 27th, which is just about less than a week from now. Though one caveat with that, they have not been able to make cross-platform multiplayer work. It's Linux to Linux, Mac to Mac, Windows to Windows only.
They've said that they're going to have a poke around and see if they can get it going, but it's not going to be in there for launch, and they don't want to give people false hope, so sort of don't have your expectations on that for now.
And they also had an explanation of exactly why that is. It's due to differences in floating point calculations on different platforms.
I guess the thing to kind of understand is that Feral is kind of at the mercy of whatever it is the original developers decided to do with their multiplayer code. Rewriting the Mac and or Linux versions of the networking isn't necessarily going to make it but cooperate with the Windows version.
Right, so the original engine requires for every single client to have the exact same calculations all the time. The server only passes along the messages, it doesn't fix anything. So...
Which is exactly how you should never build a multiplayer game server.
Yeah, I didn't want to go out and just say, well, the game's kind of crappily, poorly written, if that's the kind of limitations. But
It's not necessarily that
it happens.
they just didn't have much foresight when they were deciding this.
Any foresight at all is not much in this case.
It's all good.
Are cheats rampant in this game? Because if that's how they build it, the cheating should be child's play. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. Let's move on.
I guess the other thing to mention is that, like, I'm sure that when the game was made, they weren't targeting anything but the platforms that they're on. So there was, no reason to expect that it might someday arrive on Linux and that cross-platform multiplayer would be a concern. Like, if it's not a target that you've got to begin with, then it's something you can't plan for. Right, moving on. GOG have done a bit of a retrospective, whatever the word is that I'm looking for. Looking at their first year of Linux support, and have announced that they're going to be using a new Linux-specific installer, which is based on Mojo Setup.
Yeah, so now every single one of the GOG games available for Linux uses Mojo Setup, which was something made by Ryan Gordon to improve on Loki setup. It has a nice little graphical installer and an uninstaller, and it's also just a zip file, so you can just
Can use the unzip command.
Right, you don't need to use the graphical part if you don't actually want to. This replaces the Debian packages that they used previously. So, makes it nicer for anybody that doesn't use Debian, and also stores everything in your home folder by default, though you can choose the location. So, it follows the same trend that Steam is using now.
And it's necessary to just replace the depths completely, as far as I can see in my library with that.
Yeah.
So, which is necessary because they can only support up to 4 GB per dep file, which is not sufficient for modern games and some old games.
Didn't know of that limitation.
Yes, this is why you couldn't get some games from Humble Bundles on the Ubuntu store for the short time they were doing that promo, because they were too large. And this is also one of the reasons why Canonical is deciding to pretty much drop the paid apps on dep files on the store and stuff like that. Not important here, but yes, it was a very real limitation for people that were wanting to deploy games on Linux.
Yeah, so overall, Mojo Setup is pretty nice. I know a lot of people have been a little confused about it, but it provides lots of benefits.
Yeah.
Yes, installers are so not Linuxy in nature.
Yeah. And for those people who prefer to tar.gz, since you can use the unzip command to just extract the stuff out of the Mojo Setup archive, there's no real change there if that's the kind of experience that you want. Also vaguely related, Crypt of the Necrodancer launched on GOG. Normally we don't make a big fuss about games that are already out that have been released on a new platform, but initially it launched without Linux support on GOG. I had a chat with the developer and so I asked why, and the reasoning was that GOG's Galaxy API for leaderboards and achievements and stuff isn't available for Linux, and it's a bunch of work to pull out, and the developer didn't feel that it was worth the effort to give Linux users a lesser experience. And then in response to a bunch of requests from people who said that they were happy to have it without the achievements and without that stuff, ended up updating it and popping Linux builds up there. So +5 internets for putting in the effort when people asked for it.
I think it's kind of unfortunate that they felt held back due to GOG not supporting Linux yet in their Galaxy client.
It's really sad to me when delays like that result in people missing out on something. So it's definitely, the disappointment is being thrown at GOG rather than at any developer who uses the API, for me at least anyway.
So, Planetary Annihilation Titans has been released.
It has.
Which is a standalone expansion to the base Planetary Annihilation that adds a whole lot of units, including the super units, the like tier 3 destroy everything units.
It's they're big. They're very big. But something to note is that it's more than just a standalone expansion. It's to an extent replacing the original game.
Is that how it works?
My understanding is that you can't buy Planetary Annihilation on the Steam store anymore, and if you have it via the Uber Entertainment website, then it just automatically updated your copy to the Titans version if you were a Kickstarter backer.
So this is just like a deluxe version plus.
Yeah, that might be a better way to frame it. And you can turn off the Titans content in the Titans app.
Pretty much like FTL Enhanced Edition, where you press a button and you get the classic experience.
Yeah, except I think it turns off all of the content as opposed to FTL Advanced Edition, which doesn't.
Anyway, so this is actually an expansion if you own the original then?
No, like it's a standalone game. It downloads as a standalone game, which includes Planetary Annihilation.
Okay.
It took Namoda and I were sort of trying to work it out last night, and it took us a little while to wrap our heads around it. Apparently it's got a bunch of fixes and a bunch of improvements. I haven't had much of a chance to play it really, but it does kind of feel a little bit more responsive and a little bit some nice UI improvements as well, I think. But yeah, like considering that it includes not only the original Planetary Annihilation game and the new Titans content, it's still got all of the intervening updates that they did, and so having a new launch, I guess, of the game is probably going to help it perform better, I suppose. I think maybe that's the rationale for framing it this way. If you look at Steam, the user reviews for Planetary Annihilation Titan are mostly positive. If you look at the user reviews for Planetary Annihilation, they're mixed. So if they can find a way to move past some of the initial reception that the game had when it first launched, and there were people who weren't happy with it, then if that helps the game be appreciated by people who would enjoy it otherwise, then I guess that's good.
So other things to note is if you owned the original before August 18th, then you can get a 66% discount off of Titans.
Yeah, if you backed it on Kickstarter, you get it automatically, but if you got the early access, you get a big discount, apparently.
And they also said they will continue to update the original game, though you can't buy it anymore.
Oh, well, that's cool as well. I don't know whether multiplayer is compatible between them, whether you can... I haven't tried that yet, but I would hope that it is. So apparently there are 21 new units. There's now terrain height, and a bounty mode. I'm gonna guess that's a multiplayer thing.
It's a new game mode.
Yeah. But I can't. I'm not looking close enough, but I can't quite find a list of all the changes. But yeah, so if you enjoy Planetary Annihilation and you're after some more content, then it's totally worth checking out. If you already own it, then if you got it via Kickstarter, keep in mind that you're going to be downloading the whole game again, so make sure you get the hard drive space there. Airscape, a game that I think I had mentioned previously, has been released for Linux. There should be a Linux build of the demo probably by the time the edit of this episode is up. So if you're listening to this on the website, then you can go and check that out. And I guess I'm probably a little bit biased because I'm involved, but Daniel's put a bunch of effort into making it run on Linux, so it feels like it's worth rewarding him by at least going and having a poking around with the demo, and if you like it, check it out,
Yeah, cool.
It is super cute. Play a little yellow octopus who's been abducted by aliens. Never heard of anything like that before. Something else that I've been... Airscape, I should probably talk a little bit more about what Airscape actually is. So the idea is that you... gravity follows wherever you're standing, kind of thing. So if you walk around a curved surface, then the camera rotates so that the ground that you're standing on is always down. And that creates some interesting opportunities for I guess it's not unique, but it creates interesting platforming opportunities. And the game's it's fairly smooth on the difficulty curve, but it ramps up to be really challenging, and will make you say all sorts of expletives like fruit wobble, which I said the other day. Miriam thought that was very funny.
How naughty.
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny to have like a game that is like just so challenging and at the same time so charming. It's kind of like if Super Meat Boy and Above the Waves had a baby. Something else that I'm involved with peripherally is the Swindle has a beta on Linux. I was invited to have a quick test of the game before the Linux beta was launched. If anybody is keen on the game and interested in giving feedback on its current state, you can check it out. You got to opt into a beta branch to see that. Have any of you guys heard of the game before?
I've heard of it, mostly positive explicitives about how hard this game is.
Yeah, it is kind of hard. I guess the controls are pretty simple, but it frames itself in a way where risk versus reward, like if you want to get a lot of money, then you got to take a lot of risks, and so you'll end up dying lots because it's it can be kind of punishing, but it's cool.
And when you die, you lose a day, and you only have like 100 days to get to your goal in the game. So
Yeah,
it's would in a comparison with FTL in that respect be justified?
yeah, I think so. It's interesting. It's interesting as well because that's that risk versus reward thing. Is like it doesn't matter if you decide to exit a mission. You can exit the mission at any time you want. But if you don't get enough money by the end of the 100 days, then you don't do so well in the end game, and so you take the risks. And if you die, then you lose a day, and you've only lost a day, but a day is an opportunity to get £6,000 or whatever.
Swag YOLO money.
Yeah, but it's neat. I've been enjoying it so far. I haven't played a lot, but yeah. Aside from some gamepad issues, game itself is pretty solid on Linux. Just sort of trying to get to the bottom of the little bits and pieces that it's got, but hopefully we'll get there. Satellite Rain that we mentioned earlier is getting launched on the 28th of this month, so a week away from yesterday. It's got a new trailer up.
So it'll be released from early access, right?
Yes.
And I just wishlisted it on Humble.
Hooray!
Oh, nice. Yeah, like I said, I've been playing a bit of it. Have you guys been following it much at all?
Not at all. I was expecting you to give me the skinny, and if it's any good, because you are totally a nerd about that franchise. At least the franchise it's inspired of. Right.
Well, it's funny. I love Syndicate. And when I backed it on Kickstarter, I was like, yeah, these guys sound like they want to make Syndicate. And for better or worse, like I would love nothing more than Syndicate for Linux. Maybe some slightly updated graphics, but I'd love that gameplay. And Satellite Rain, you can definitely see the influences there, and you can see where it's borrowing from Syndicate, and it's clearly inspired by. But it is trying to be its own game, and I like and appreciate that too. So Syndicate was very mission-based. Between missions, you would update your agents and your loadouts and do your R&D stuff. I guess a little bit like XCOM, Enemy Unknown, and stuff that we were talking about earlier. And that kind of modularity of the mission type gameplay means that as soon as you hit that safe zone, or as soon as you fulfill your mission objectives and complete the mission, you're done. You don't have to care about the consequences of the actions that you've had, or the actions that you've taken. Whereas Satellite Rain makes it all feel a little bit more sandboxy by having everything take place in the game world, and so a mission is given to you in a more organic fashion. You'll have something, you'll hack something, and you'll find out about some R&D stuff that you might want to research. And so you from that terminal, you just get your agents and you walk across to where the stuff that you want to steal is, and you break into there. I mean, you could do that on your own without the mission as well. So it
has the open world elements, which can change the gameplay a little bit.
Yeah, and so it ends up having a very, very different kind of feel. But it's still neat. There are more opportunities for stealth play than Syndicate had, I guess. And then also that kind of nice thing of like you put your guns away and you're an average citizen walking down the street and no one cares about you except for enemy agents, which was always fun in Syndicate. It's got something a little bit like the Persuadertron, but I haven't used it so much yet. But yeah, I am enjoying it. If somebody goes, "Hey, I want to play Syndicate right now," they may not have the best kind of experience. But yeah, if it sounds like if like an open world imagining of what Syndicate could be sounds interesting, then yeah, you might find it enjoyable. Is that me enough waffling on about Satellite Rain?
My interest is still there.
The open world thing is broken up into districts, and so you kind of you start in like a quarter of the city, and you're in the slums and stuff, and so you got to do a bunch of missions before you can leave and move into other regions of the city. So I haven't gotten out of that, so I can't speak for how the content opens up from that point. But at the moment, it feels like you kind of, it doesn't feel like a huge world. It feels like a world that is of a size that you can absorb and understand the scale of. It takes about, I don't know, a minute to walk from one side of the map to the other, for whatever that's worth.
One important question still. Is there a soundtrack edition?
I don't know. Let me check. I think I'm getting a soundtrack as like a Kickstarter reward, but yeah, it doesn't look like they have like a specific, collector's edition that has the soundtrack, but it's available as DLC on Steam at least.
Nice. So I know which version I will be getting.
They might also have it on Bandcamp or something. I can ask and let you know later.
Civilization Beyond Earth Rising Tide has a new trailer out, and it's confirmed to be a simultaneous release on all platforms.
Hooray. Yeah, so
that's exciting.
Before, it seemed like it was probably going to happen, but we didn't know for sure. So that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a couple of patches where the game has fallen behind the Windows version, and sort of that kind of made it feel like you could expect that it would probably, release of an expansion would probably fall behind a little. But yeah, nice to have that confirmation.
And the video just talks about some of the new gameplay features.
Tell us about them.
Some of the factions and terrain and units and things like that.
I feel bad. I haven't watched the video yet, but I'm vaguely anticipating it. So I think there's more like open gameplay, if I remember right.
Yes.
So the ability to build like floating
cities, right?
Cities and stuff.
More naval units, I believe, and a whole bunch of other things. It's really a very...
Yeah, I think the diplomatic system's been overhauled a bit as well.
It's a very comprehensive expansion. It adds tons of features.
Oh, and hybrid units? Do I remember something about hybrid units?
Yes.
So that's kind of neat. It's a hybrid between the affinities, I guess, rather than between the aliens and...
Right. So you can then have...
human units. Although that may...
You can have a mix between, like, superiority and...
yeah.
And harmony or whatever.
Yeah. So that's cool. Crowdfunding! I just wanted to say that. No, we do have some crowdfunding to talk about. XO is a campaign that's just finished, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a sci-fi strategy game with this kind of wireframe rendering thing going on, which is an interesting aesthetic. It's got the Square Enix collective behind it, I think, which is interesting as well. It just passed through on its 40,000 US goal.
And it's coming to Linux.
And yeah, so I think Corbin backed that one. I didn't get a chance to check it out before it finished, but it looks neat. And it's gonna have a soundtrack by Jim Guthrie, who did Sword and Sorcery.
Cool.
The game Everspace we have talked about last cast is now around 60% funded, and as a thank you they have released 10 minutes of gameplay as a video.
Yeah, Neat.
So, if you want to see how this game plays out before you consider funding, this would be the video to check out. Linux is now the first stretch goal, so if you want to play it on Linux, you don't give a fudge before that stretch goal is hit.
Which is an improvement over
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
not mentioning Linux at all before on the actual page.
Yeah, for sure.
This is now a good reason to link to Chi's article about having Linux as a stretch goal again.
Yeah, I mean it's awkward in that like you say, anybody who wants to play it on Linux, if it hits the funding goal, then they're still not going to get on board because they got to wait until the stretch goal's been met. The people who, are on the platforms that it already is targeting, that are guaranteed, that stretch goal's not going to motivate them to pledge more. So it becomes a bit of a dead zone,
Yeah.
But it's all good. It's nice that they have heard that people care about it. It's up to them how they want to prioritize stuff, and I guess the big thing to kind of remember, always is that the crowdfunding campaign is not that it's not the end of the project. Like when it's released, when it's out, if it's got Linux support, you can pick it up then. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, if it looks like it's gonna get you what you want, if you believe in the developers and you want to support them, then go ahead. Otherwise, sit tight. I'm sure we'll see something eventually.
And they were saying that even if the goal is not reached, they intend on doing a Mac and Linux version in the future, but not probably at launch.
They're using UE4, so unless they make some really bad middleware or engine plugin choices, it should be pretty safe.
Yeah, we'll probably just have to wait till the release. We'll see.
Probably the biggest news in crowdfunding recently has been the start of a new crowdfunding site called fig.co. What's special about it? It's a crowdfunding site just for games, built around the specific dynamics of games crowdfunding that have blossomed on Kickstarter but are not really natively supported by what that site does. And the other special thing is that it has people from Double Fine, In Exile Entertainment, and Obsidian, and Abubuff on board of its advisory board, like Tim Schafer, Brian Fargo, Fergus Urquhart, and Aaron Isaacson. And the third big thing is that you can actually become a right proper investor and acquire equity with a minimum investment of $1,000 in a given project.
It's all a really interesting take. I like the idea of saying, because there are going to be investors who are kind of vaguely interested in checking out a project, and I kind of like the idea of bundling in that kind of contribution with more traditional crowdfunding to give you a higher apparent critical mass, if that makes sense. Like if everybody pulls together, then that's more money, but there are investors who look at Kickstarter and they go, well, not really sure, looks a bit sus. It's the platform isn't really geared towards making anything other than angel investment feel appropriate, whereas this is also targeting, I guess, more traditional kinds of investment where people are acquiring equity.
Right.
But that's something that developers have got to think about as well, whether they're keen to put that stuff up for grabs.
Some more bigger features of the site is that it is curated and it's aiming for 2 projects per month. And it's not just a fire and forget funding campaign. They will be involved with marketing and PR after the campaign, so
yeah,
it's a bit more involved and tailored, curated. It's just a very interesting concept, and especially in the days of crowdfunding fatigue, this looks to be a thing that could limit that by limiting flow of projects, improving visibility, and overall having curation.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Of course, that means not everybody will be on it, but there is still Kickstarter and Indiegogo for everybody to be on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, it feels like curation goes against the concept of crowdfunding, where it's all about giving the opportunity for people who are interested in something to come together without getting in the way of people who aren't interested in it. Open platforms feel like they're a better fit, but definitely with the equity thing involved, like the ability to attract the right kinds of people to the right kinds of projects needs curation, I guess. So it's an interesting take.
Yeah,
It's sort of a hybrid between traditional crowdfunding and having a publisher.
Traditional investment. Well, I don't. Yeah, it is. I guess they are kind of playing a little bit of a publisher role. Hey,
Yes.
it's interesting. Very interesting. Be cool to see how it goes. I guess you mentioned a connection to Double Fine before. The CEO of Fig is Justin Bailey, who is Double Fine's former chief financial officer. So he's jumped ship to go and do that now.
So the first project that's on Fig
Yeah.
is Outer Wilds, which will be coming to Linux. It's by Mobius Digital, who the president is Masayoka, who many people would know as the one of the main characters from the TV show Heroes, who
Played Hero.
yeah, who also happened to be a no, yeah,
A digital effects artist? Yeah.
for Industrial Light and Magic on the Star Wars prequels, which I didn't know previously. It's interesting. Anyway, the game looks really ambitious. It's a open star system exploration sort of.
Either backpacking in space. I like that kind of notion.
You're trying to solve the star system is constantly resetting itself every 20 minutes, and you have no idea why. So you're trying to learn what's going on and also trying to travel around the system and visit all the planets and things.
It's interesting. It looks like this kind of. It looks very quirky, you know? Kind of fun thing going on.
And also a complete astrophysics simulation.
it might be worth pointing out that this game is already funded. They are not doing the classic fixed time frame, it seems, but they're actually like a company would having funding rounds, and this one was kept at 50,000, but they have another 500,000 in investor interest on top of that. So
it's like this is so hard to wrap my head around. Like in the top bar, it says that they've got 75,000 out of a 125,000 goal, and then it's got 27 days and 4 hours left. But then there's that thing as well. It's like it feels like it's not very clear what all of that ends up meaning.
yeah, it's a bit confusing. You probably have to read up on this. And if you're going to invest on this platform in general, I would recommend reading up on it because this is more involved in general. You should be knowing what you do.
Yeah, you got to be an accredited investor by whatever definition they have for that. But yeah, so yeah, like we're saying, very differently and interesting approach to crowdfunding, and it's kind of cool to see people playing around with ideas that go beyond the kind of things that Kickstarter and Indiegogo do, and the other platforms out there. Another crowdfunding campaign that a couple of people have mentioned is Aquanox Deep Descent, which is being made by Digital Arrow, which some Linux users may have heard of previously. Their project Dialogus, The Winds of War, which is yet to be released, had a lot of attention back in the day.
And isn't going to be released in ever.
Yeah, no, Aquanox looks pretty cool, but unfortunately they say that they're not in a position to confirm Linux support at this point. I know people at Digital Arrow, and I know that they're interested in Linux support, but if they're not in a position where they want to commit to it, then they're not at a position where they want to commit to it. In their FAQ, they say, we are fully focusing on PC, Windows 7, 8, and 10, and other operating systems like OS X and Linux are high on our list, but we can't fully confirm these platforms right now, especially not for the initial launch. However, we know that a lot of core gamers are on Linux, and we love Linux and SteamOS as a platform for games as well. We have already done several other games on Linux, and therefore a Linux version is very likely.
So
that's their stance. But it's kind of like the aerospace situation. If it's not confirmed, then it's difficult to justify getting on board.
Yeah, you really shouldn't put your money into something that is not confirmed.
And also eerily similar in that they both use Unreal Engine 4, and both of them you're piloting ships around.
Equinox is a sort of
Submarine game.
new installment or reimagining of an older franchise. Are you familiar with that, Dorito? I hear it was pretty popular in Europe.
It was around everywhere, but I never played it because I am not a fan of underwater settings in general. So I never really got into it.
I've never played it.
I hadn't heard of it before this a previous incarnation of this project, which I was sort of slightly involved with.
I've never played it before, but the art style reminds me a little bit of Disney's Atlantis.
Huh.
Particularly how the windows on the ships are.
It I like the idea of a 6 Degrees of Freedom descent-like type thing underwater. It's kind of cool. At least that was the angle it was going at before. I don't know if they're sticking with that, but I assume they are.
Yeah, it looks like that's mentioned on their Kickstarter page.
Yeah. And they're I think Nordic Games is publishing it. They've had a couple of Linux titles along the way as well.
Cool.
And I think Corbin wanted to make a note of Linux gamers being mentioned as core gamers there.
Hooray.
I don't know what core gamers means, but it's awesome regardless.
It means we're all awesome.
Yep. Anything else that anybody wanted to bring up?
That I think my dog needs to go out again.
Alright, let's wrap it up. Thank you for listening. It's been a lot of fun. It's been nice to come back and join you guys again. Thanks to Rita Hero.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks to everyone who's listening. You can send us feedback via email to cast@steamlug.org. You can join us on IRC in the #SteamLUG channel on freenode.net. You can follow us on Twitter @SteamLUG. You can join us on the Google Plus things, like plus SteamLUG. Is that how you talk about Google Plus things? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
We're on the YouTubeages as SteamLUG, and we have our steamlug.org website. And you can also use telepathic mind waves to send us messages. We're not as good at receiving those, but
We're working on it.
Yeah, we are on Otherwave SteamLUG because we are SteamLUG. If you don't know it by now, you're never ever gonna know it.
Oh dear.
You can also see upcoming changes to our website at staging.steamlug.org. Exciting.
Oh yeah, you can. Always check that out. It's cool. And contribute.
Oh yes. Because we're on GitHub. SteamLUG.
GitHub. SteamLUG. To your friends.
See ya, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
One day I should change that recording sound to Tenoika Banzai! So, geez, will you do the honors?
Sure, why not? Just let me have a little bit more soup. Mmm.